Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is you're listening to this episode. Thank you for being here. My guest today is Tiff Carson. She is a passionate and inspiring author, podcast host, and speaker based in Alberta, Canada. She has the unique perspective of having lived through her own complex journey of sibling grief, trauma, and mental health issues. Tiff believes when you use your voice, you create positive change for yourself and the world around you. Tiff's goal is to inspire others by showing how she used her voice to heal. As a devoted mother of three children, Tiff is an advocate for breaking cycles of generational pain so that future generations can live healthier lives. She reminds us all that no matter what our journey looks like, it can be hard, but also beautiful. Thank you so much for being here
Thank you for having me.
and for being open to sharing your story on my podcast, because I know you have a podcast, which is called
Hard, Beautiful Journey,
and you've written a book called,
Dancing in the Rain.
which is not even in your bio, the book
Yeah,
title anyway.
yeah.
So I just wanted to pop that in here at the beginning here, and we'll circle back to that where people can find you and all of that at the end. But um, in your information that you shared with me, you talk about the memoir, and a lot of your focus about the grief story that you wanted to share was about your brother.
Mm.
But what I know about grief personally, and just all the stories that people have shared with me, is that our grief tends to start pretty early on in our lives in childhood.
Mhm.
And you haven't shared really any of that so much. I mean, I'm sure your brother's story has a little bit to do with that. I mean, if there's an age gap, things like
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
um, what was your experience with grief as a child?
Well, the ones that stick out for me for sure are my grandparents. That is actually before that. I lost a dog. Um, that was very, very, very big part of our family, and it was actually poisoned by one of our neighbors that absolutely despised dogs. And so my brother and I are 18 months apart, and then we have a younger sister that's 6 years younger than me. So my brother and I were about 7 and 8 years old, approximately. And it was our job to let our dog out in the morning before school and to feed her. Her name was Mitzi. And just do all the things with the dog. If we were going to have this dog, we were responsible for it, and which we loved. And so one morning, my brother let her out, took her outside, but then he came back in to finish getting ready for school. And then when he went to call her in, she was walking really, really slow into the house. And he was like calling for me and my mom, and so we went, and right in our very back porch, she walked in the door and she literally collapsed and just died, like right in front of our eyes. And so that was the first real, like, what the heck happened, and just the devastation of losing our little girl. And that was, yeah, I can't even describe how devastating it was for my brother too. Like, he was super, super close to her. He always was close with all of the dogs that he's owned in his life. So that was, I would say that was our first big grief moment and trauma that we experienced. And then, of course, losing our grandparents and seeing them deteriorate over the years and not really be themselves. Like, some of them ended up with dementia or a form of dementia. And so seeing them go from, you know, your grandparents like you knew them to not really being that was definitely a difficult thing for us to experience. Um, so yeah, those were the ones growing up for sure.
I was told too, growing up, that I was too little to remember, but we had a dog that was supposedly had been poisoned too.
Oh,
So,
really? Yeah,
yeah.
it's awful. It was It wasn't just our dog, like it was, they actually ended up having to call the police on this family, this couple, because they were doing it to numerous dogs in the neighborhood, and ours was one of them. And then my parents went and got, this is crazy. So before the police were called, my parents, they waited a few months for us to, get used to, like, just go through the grief and stuff. And then they ended up getting another dog for us. We named her Ginger, and same thing happened. But we got her to the vet before, and we brought her home and she ran away. She was like, yeah, no, I'm not staying here. I'm not dealing with that. So yeah, it was losing a dog and then getting another one and then her running away. And after that, we didn't get another dog for a while. So I laugh now, but at the time it was like, this is not very good. This is sad. So
How was grief talked about in your home as growing up?
it wasn't, like, ever, ever. I saw my mom cry a lot growing up, but never my dad. Never, ever. I never saw my grandparents cry or show grief of any kind. Um, the first time I saw my grandma cry and show grief was actually at my uncle, her son's funeral. He passed away tragically in a farming accident. And that was the first time I saw her outwardly grieve. And I was probably about 25 years old then. So like it was just not shown whatsoever. It was stiff upper lip and hold it all in and be tough, and that's it. The boys, the men were definitely held to that standard a lot more than the girls. I noticed that, and I wrote about it in my book, is be tough, suck it up, you're a boy, you're a man, those kind of words were said. Um, but I also saw it from the women. So it was it was definitely not as open to talk about the hard things as it is now.
What impact did that have on you as you went into adulthood and experienced more grief as we do in life? And how did you see that maybe your brother handled it differently or did things differently from you? Like, how did you see that dynamic play out? Not learning about grief, right? Not
Mhm.
talking about it, the impact that that had on each of you.
My brother was very uh I call I call him a gentle giant. He was always very open with his feelings towards certain people and showed his emotions. Um, Same with me. Like I definitely showed my emotions. Um, but when it came to grief, and I actually still catch myself doing it sometimes where I'll start to cry and I'll say, sorry, 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 and I don't know how many times in the last even week where I'll cry and I'll start to say that. And then I'm like, no, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. And I'm almost 50, and it's taken almost 50 years for me to stop apologizing for showing emotion and being okay with it. So it's definitely been a difficult thing to just get past I don't know if it's embarrassment or the shame of being vulnerable. I don't know. But in the last 2 years, definitely since my brother passed away, I'm learning to just say, screw it. Like I'm okay with you seeing this. And I am not a pretty crier whatsoever. And I'm definitely okay with people seeing the real me and what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing, because it's giving them the freedom, I guess, the courage to do the same thing.
What's your brother's name?
Corey.
Corey. You talk about, his struggle with addiction and things like that in the information you shared with me. Um, when did those things start to come to light? How old were you? And I recognize you're only 18 months apart. My oldest is a son, and then I have a daughter, and they're 18 months apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can imagine that. And there's this. I'm reading this book right now. The author will be coming on the podcast. It's called Always a Sibling, and she talks about her brother passing. But what I never really connected or thought about until reading her book was that the relationship that we have with our siblings is the longest relationship we will have with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
if that person is not in your life, there's still an emotional bond there of
Mm-hmm.
some sort, whether it be healthy or unhealthy, there's still that connection. And it's the longest connection. And I personally, I think sometimes your siblings, they know more about you than anybody else because they've seen you through your entire life, right?
Through the
For the
entire
most part.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, just feel free to share what you want to share about that. And
Well, the tears are already starting, so
it's okay.
wow. So yeah, he was 18 months older than me. I wrote about that in my book as well, about the sibling relationship and sibling grief, just in general. Um, that it's under recognized. Everybody definitely reverts to the parents first, which absolutely understand that as a mom. Um, I absolutely understand that. And then if it's, an older person, like they revert to the wife and the kids of that person. But there's very, very few people that actually ask how you're doing as the sibling of somebody who's passed away. And they were the closest person to you growing up for many years, right? And there's lots of times where you have many siblings. So it just compounds, right? So I definitely wanted to bring that to light in my book. So he was 18 months older than me, and we literally were attached at the hip growing up. Like there's this many pictures, but there's this one picture. We had like white hair, big blue eyes, and like if you saw one, there was the other one right beside. And we lived in a small town. We went everywhere together. We did everything together. And he was my best buddy. And then my sister was born when he was 7 and I was 6. And so she was like our little baby doll. And it was just awesome having a new little sibling. But we were still connected, like super connected. We did lip sync concerts together. We did everything. And then we moved a few times. My dad was a musician, and so wherever he was playing the most in his band, we would kind of like move into that area. So we moved a few times, usually between two locations. Um, and move, the one last move before everything changed was very, very hard on him and my brother and I, because we moved to a farm and we were not farmers at all. And it was very isolating for us. And we were very social kids. Like in the house, the neighborhood we lived in before moving to the farm, we were like, there was just the neighborhood gang. Like, you know what I mean? Like the big neighborhood gang of kids. We would just play hide and seek, and we wouldn't come home till like 10 at night, and we would be with our friends all the time. And then we were on a farm, and it was like, where are we? Why are we here? And it was a really big adjustment for us in a lot of ways. And something happened when my brother was 13 living on that farm that I didn't know about until 3 years before he died. And but something happened to me around the same time from my brother. My brother beat me up to a pulp in our kitchen on the farm. And I had no idea why, like zero idea. It just came out of nowhere. And because him and I were super close. And then all of a sudden he beat me up. And I was terrified of him after that. And I didn't know what happened. And then what happened after that, he used to be, before that happened, he was a very talented hockey player, very good athlete. Like he was being looked at by lots of people because he was just so good, so fast, a goal scorer. And then all of a sudden, like that, it just changed. And I call it in my book, he started running. He just, he was, he just didn't want to be anywhere near us, nowhere near our family. He was getting into trouble. He was doing B&Es. He was getting into fights. He got some assault charges, and it literally from 13 till he was 27, he was in and out of jail. He was constantly in trouble with the law. And that's when he started getting addicted to drugs and alcohol. And so him beating me up and then going the direction that he was, I didn't understand why he was doing that and why that happened. And it just made this huge wedge between us. And I was so angry at him for doing what I thought he was doing to my parents, and like just not being a good kid, and like, why are you doing this? So he went one direction and I literally went the other. And I was like, because around town in this small community that we lived in, our last name is Carson. So they would say, oh, that Carson kid. Oh, that Carson kid. Just like his dad, that Carson kid, right? And so like that was what I heard around town. And I made it my mission to not be another Carson kid. I was going to be a different Carson kid. And so he went that direction and I went to the overachiever. Like, I am going to show you all that I am not like him. And that has literally moved into my life in so many ways. Like I'm an overachiever still to this day. And so, yeah, that's how the addiction came around, was at that time of his life. And it continued on for the rest of his life until he passed away. And he passed away of a fentanyl overdose in 2021.
One change, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing, we never know what's going to change the trajectory of our lives.
Yep.
We're just, in the ripples of the decisions that we make as parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the impact that has. Cause and effect has been something that's really come up a lot for me lately. Um, we learn that concept as young children. You touch the hot burner on the stove, you're going to get burned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, now I'm not going to touch the burner because I'm going to get my hand burned. But we never really apply that same principle to our lives, really. We don't think about the impact of our words. We don't think about, the cause and effect of our words and our actions and our choices and our decisions, and how that affects everybody else in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Are you open to sharing what it was that he was projecting so much of his anger out
Mm-hmm.
on you and the rest of the family? And
Yeah, I wrote about it in the book, and it's amazing how when these things happen, how it is a learning lesson for me now as a parent and how it's changed my parenting. It was something that happened between my dad and my brother. My brother, so my sister and I and my mom had gone out of town for a few days, and my brother stayed home with my dad to help him around the farm. And my dad was playing in the band in the town that we lived in, and he asked my brother to stay home and not go out. But my brother, like I said, he hated the farm. He hated the isolation. He hated it with a passion. And so he got on his bike and he rode his bike to a nearby community where some of his friends live. And he got a ride home from some people with his bike, and the lights were off when he got home. So he thought he got home before my dad did. And when he went in the house, the lights came on. That's my dad's MO, is sitting in the dark, because that's what his parents did. And the lights came on and my dad was there. And from what my brother has told me and my mom and a trauma therapist, he pummeled him. He beat him into oblivion, where he could hardly even walk up the stairs to his bedroom. And when he got up the next morning, he said that my dad didn't even bat an eye when he saw his black eyes. And he said that my dad said, if you're not going to respect what I have to say and listen to me, then you can just leave. I'll pay you and you can just leave. And yeah, sorry. So I found this out 3 years before he died from my mom. And literally, as she was telling me this story, at first I was like, there's no way my dad did that. There's no way. Like I just instantly went to denial. But in my soul, it was like she was handing me the puzzle piece. Like, here you go. Because not long after that happened to my brother beat me up. And he was so angry at me and my little sister for not getting the same treatment as him. And literally, that's when he started running. He was like, okay, he doesn't want me here, so I'm just going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to run. He told me to leave. So that's what happened. There was another incident a couple years actually before that, that he actually got severely beaten by my grandpa in front of all of us. So a lot of physical violence, and where he felt like he wasn't loved by the male influences in his life. And that's very, very devastating to the foundation of a boy. But why I say that's a lesson for me now is parenting is so hard. I have 3 kids. All 3 of my kids were IVF babies. It took 10 years to get them, 10 very long years to get them. And all 3 of them were diagnosed with ADHD and ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. And so they have been a very difficult parenting journey, very difficult. So I get the the difficulty of parenting to my core. Like, I get it. And even with the difficulties and things that are said or done in the heat of a moment, when you're angry, when you're upset, all of that, the thing that I've learned from all of this, from my brother's journey, is that how you handle the after, how you handle when you've done or said something that could have hurt somebody else, like your children. Sitting down, take the time you need first. Take the time you need to decompress and or walk away or breathe or something. But then come back and actually have a conversation with them. And I have done that so many times since I've learned about my brother's trauma. And I know it is making a difference with my kids and my relationship with them, because I wrote about it in a book. There was one morning where my boys were just so disrespectful to me. We were on our way to a doctor's appointment for one of them, and they weren't listening. They were talking back. It was a horrible morning. And I said the same things my dad did. I said, if you're not going to listen to me, then you're not going to live here. Get out of my house. I said the same words my dad did. And I went into my room to get ready. And I was so mad at myself. I was so mad that I chose those words to say to my kids. But I also gave myself grace that, this is hard. And I came out of the room and they were bawling, like getting on their backpacks and trying to get their shoes on, and they were crying. And one of my boys said, "You're the worst mom ever. Who tells their kids to leave?" And the other one was looking at me with like literally tears streaming down his face. He's like, "Where are we supposed to go? I don't know where we're supposed to go." And like just bawling. And we get in the car. And before I started driving, they were sitting in the back, and I turned around and I just said, "I am so sorry for what I said to you. I didn't mean what I said, but I want you to know why I said it and why I got to that point, because this was going on." And I said, "But I never should have said those words to you. And I hope that you forgive me." And both of them were just like, "We're so sorry, Mom. Like, we know what we were doing was not right." And one of my boys said, "Mom, it's okay if people cry." Like, "I know it is, buddy. And it's okay if you cry right now too." And he started crying again. And then my other boy, they're twins, he said, "Yeah, and who cares if people see it and say anything?" So I was just like, good for you. Like, good for recognizing that there is nothing wrong with showing vulnerability. And since that day, it's what I do. If there's something that has come up and there's something that was hurtful, I address it sooner than later, because all my dad had to do, sorry, all he had to do was say sorry. That's it. That is it. And it would have changed their whole relationship. So all it takes is, "I'm sorry."
We're both crying. Oh, how old are your children?
15-year-old daughter and 11-year-old twin boys.
Um, I recently listened to a meditation um, that has you imagining your inner child. Ugh, that's hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, what would you say to your younger self, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I like feel this, like for your brother, like this sadness of not feeling wanted. Ugh, it's that indifference. I think that's almost, I don't know if it's worse. They say in psychology, they say it's worse. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so when I learned about his trauma, um, well, and all of these things, there's even more, but that's the big one, or some of the big ones. But it was, I literally, because I was going through my own mental health challenges with my, like going through infertility and our kids, and I had a complete mental breakdown. And it was around the same time where I learned about this. And I was walking on a beach in North Carolina. I went to a mom's retreat, and I was walking on a beach in North Carolina, and I was just walking by myself. And I was like, okay, if I can give myself grace and love myself with all of this stuff that I'm going through, I absolutely can give my brother the same. And because he's experienced way more than me. And I wrote this in the book. I chose to love him through it. Everything that he was going through, everything that he was still experiencing with his addictions, which had not gone away, they were getting worse. And for those who have known an addict, had a family member that's an addict, it is a very difficult relationship. Very. And so me choosing to love him through it was a huge step. It was huge. Um, just based on everything that had happened over the years. Um, but when I tell you, I'm gonna cry again. Um, when I made that decision, he could feel it. He could actually feel the change. He could feel it in how I looked at him, how I talked to him, how I just sat with him, how everything, everything changed when I made that decision to love him through it. And our relationship was immediately back to when we were little kids. Immediately. Because he could feel it, I could feel it. And I was like, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to be there for you. And I'm never going to leave you. And yeah, I'm so grateful that he chose to use his voice. He was the one who told my mom about what happened to him because none of us knew. None of us knew what happened to him and why his life went that way. And he chose to tell my mom. And then my mom chose to tell me. And if he wouldn't have done that, we wouldn't have gotten to where we were before he died. And so he gave me the biggest gift, all of us the biggest gift, by sharing what happened to him and being vulnerable. I have no regrets now with how our relationship was when he passed away, because it was beautiful.
Where was your dad in all of this?
My dad just read the book recently. Um, during the 3 years when I found out about what happened, I had a hard time understanding him. I didn't and still have never stopped loving my dad, because he's my dad. And like I said, I understand the challenges of parenting, and I I give him grace and all of that, right? But I still have a really hard time with him not accepting and admitting and acknowledging the pain and the trauma that changed my brother's life. My dad will not acknowledge it. And he will go to his grave with not fully acknowledging what was done, what was said. And that's heartbreaking. His stance, I just talked to him 2 weeks ago about it because he was very angry at me for the book, even though I asked him repeatedly for his side of the story. Repeatedly asked him for his side because there is always two sides. And he just says it's the way that they were raised, and my brother was not behaving, was not listening, and my brother was out of control and all of this kind of stuff. And I can't change his mind. I can't make him acknowledge anything. And I have to come to peace with that, or I won't have a relationship with my dad either. But I am very okay with me sitting in the hard and talking things out, and just saying, okay, this is where we're at. I know you're mad. Like, I went and saw them 2 weeks ago, and you could tell he was very angry at me, very. And he was just gonna, I call it sweeping it under the rug. He was just gonna sweep it under the rug, like nothing. I'm not talking about it. And he was sitting on one of their swings, like it's a two-seater. And I just said, so may I come and sit beside you? And he's like, sure. So I went and sat beside him, and I was vulnerable, and I just said, okay, let's talk about it. You're obviously upset with me for what I wrote, so let's talk. And so he wasn't going to at first, and then he did, and he was upset with what I wrote and wished that I would have asked him his side of the story. I'm like, pretty sure I did many times. And that I didn't talk about my mom's side of the family in the book, just his side. And I was trying to explain to him that none of the things that happened to me and my brother happened at the hands of my mom's family. So talking about my mom's family's issues wouldn't have related to my brother and I and our journey. So yeah, I understand that I talked about the Carson side, but that's because stuff happened with the Carson side that changed our relationship and changed people's lives. And when I talk about I didn't want to be a Carson kid, I went through a divorce 2 years ago. It was just made official in May of this year. And I have been working tirelessly to get my name back, to be a Carson. And I told him I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love the Carson family. Because it's not easy to go back to your maiden name here in Canada anyway. And I said, that's how much I love the Carson family. I just don't love some of the things that happened in the Carson family. So that's kind of where our relationship is at right now. It's strained, but I'm okay with that because it took a year and a half to write this book. And there was many times where I almost stopped writing. And I kept hearing, no, keep going, put it all in, put it all in. And I know how many people it's helping already. And that's worth it to me.
Comes back to the cause and effect. And perhaps maybe you don't see yet how this may unlock something for your father,
Mm-hmm.
having read it. And, it's again, you kind of touched on it on the information you shared, but this generational trauma, the generational belief systems, and the generational patterns that we, I think, subconsciously pass on to our kids unintentionally.
Yep.
But clearly, there is something your dad is holding on to.
Oh, yes. And it's in the book as well. The things that my dad experienced.
Oh, so you know.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in the book as well. Not in great detail, but it was more so at the hands of his mom than his dad. Um, he actually went to live with his grandparents because it was such a bad relationship. He says it was also because they didn't have enough room there for all of the kids. There were 6 kids. It was a small house. His grandparents lived across the street. So he's like, I'm just going to go live there. But there was times where he lived or stayed at the church with the nuns. Um, it was, yeah, he had a very, very hard upbringing as well. Um, just violence and like I said, sweeping things under the rug. We're not talking about it. We are not talking about it. We are not dealing with this. Nothing happened. My grandma, my dad's mom, had many mental health challenges. There was many times where she wouldn't come out of her room and they had to fend for themselves. So a lot of stuff. And he's just choosing to not go there. And that's his choice. And I cannot, that's what I've come to realize is I cannot force anybody to do their own work, but I can do my own. And I'm going to continue doing my own and showing other people how I'm doing the work on myself. And if it inspires them to do the same, fantastic. But I cannot force anybody anymore. All I can do is my own thing, my own work.
You shared how you decided that you were going to love your brother through it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you given any thought to what that would look like if you chose to do that with your father?
I have chosen to love him through it. Actually, when I found out that he had read it and that he was angry at me, um, at first, my initial reaction, knee-jerk reaction was like, well, screw you. Like like I was just angry back at him. And that only lasted maybe a day. But I was very angry at him for some of the things that he was saying to me. And then I actually heard, I hear my brother often, his spirit, and I heard him say, love him through it. Love him through it. And I made the decision 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, I'm going to love him through it. because cry kid, he was a little boy too that experienced some really hard things. And that's why generational trauma is hard. And but my whole goal, my whole purpose, I know, is to shine a light on it and do like what I'm doing with my kids is let's talk about this stuff. Let's work through it. Let's stop sweeping stuff under the rug. Let's get to a place where your heart is okay before we move on. Because I've seen what it's done to my dad and I've seen what it's done to my brother. And I don't want that for my kids. I don't want that for your kids. I don't want that for anybody's kids. Because I lived with it. And I wouldn't want anybody's life to play out the way that my brothers did. In some respects, he did have many good moments in his life. But the hard parts, I wouldn't want that for anybody. Because it was very, very, very difficult for him.
There's this thought that I think in psychology that young girls, women tend to marry someone like their father. That could be good or bad, right? Had you married someone who had those qualities like your father?
That's an interesting question. In some respects, yes, and in some, no. My ex-husband is a very good father in terms of like always wanting to do stuff with them and is very active in their lives. But he's also a non-talker. Let's see, yeah, there's nothing to see here, folks. Let's not like, what, you want to talk? Oh no. Okay. So like those kind of similarities are definitely there. And that was hard for me, especially over the last 10, 8 to 10 years, as I was like starting to like, okay, no, I need to talk about this stuff or this is not gonna end well. And I wasn't getting any of it back in return. And that was very difficult on our marriage for sure.
Do you feel like with the diagnosis of the children, I imagine that that brought up a lot of feelings from the past of the anger that you witnessed in the home. Did you have this? I mean, did you have this united front with your spouse to work through those struggles, or do you feel like those were some of the things that your marriage just couldn't, where you couldn't come together?
No, so we tried for 5 years before we ended up finally getting our daughter after we were married. But we started the fertility process 1 year after we were married because you have to wait the year here in Canada if it's not working. And he was very supportive in that whole journey to the point where my body actually was they said that it was, I was 30, how old was I? 31-ish at 30, 31 when I started the fertility program, and my body was acting like mid 40s. It just was not, it wasn't doing what they thought it was going to do. I was on the highest dose possible of infertility, of IVF drugs, and I was still not producing follicles like I should have been. Um, there was one point where there was so much blood work and so many ultrasounds that my husband ended up not going to all of them just because there were so many. But on this one particular day, he decided to come. He said, "No, I'm going to come with you." And if he didn't come that day, we wouldn't have our daughter, because they did their normal blood work and ultrasounds, and then they normally you just go home and go back a couple days later. But this day they said, "Kate, we need you to meet across the room in that boardroom." And I knew it was not good. And the doctors came in and nurses, and they said, so it's not looking good for this cycle. You're not producing enough follicles at this point where you should be. And you either can stop the cycle now and wait about 3 months, because you have to wait for your system to get back to a little bit of normalcy, or we keep going and we try for the best and see if there's any changes in the next couple of days. And I was so exhausted because this was our second attempt at in vitro. And we had already done all of the other stuff like IUIs, intrauterine insemination stuff. We'd already done all of those. And I was going to just say, "No more, I'm done." And James, my ex-husband, said, "No, we're going. We're going to keep going. And I know it's going to work. We're going to keep going." And we got 3 follicles, and we got enough embryos, and my daughter, it happened, and we got our daughter. So he was definitely a rock for me during all of that. When we had her, it was like the biggest blessing in the world. But we didn't have any more embryos left. And so if we were going to do it again, we'd have to start all over again. And it's very expensive. And we're happy with having our daughter. And I don't know, at about when she was 3 years old, we started talking again and said, "Do you want to try it again?" And his parents loaned us the money, and we started again. And this time, I don't know if like things cleared up down there or what, but it went better than the first time. And we ended up with twin boys. And so it was hard. It was 10 years. So there's 4.5 years between our daughter and our sons. But it's very hard on a marriage, in the respect that you have the expectation that your bodies are supposed to do these things naturally, that you're a failure if you don't. And him and I are both extreme high achievers. My overachiever tendency came flying through, and it was just very hard to wrap my head around the fact that I couldn't become a mom the natural way. And it was for him too. Like there was many times where he would say something off the cuff, like, "Yeah, well, I'm not able to have a kid normally like everybody else." And like a man going in and doing that thing in a fertility clinic is not romantic, for one thing, whatsoever. So yeah, it's very hard on marriages, very difficult on marriages. And then to go through that journey of just trying to get them here, and then to have the parenting struggles that we've had with them, that's when I had my mental breakdown. I was just so angry at God. I remember hiding behind the clothes in my closet, hiding from my kids because I was so done. I was just done with everything. And I just said, why did it take 10 years to get them for us to not enjoy parenting them? Because it was not enjoyable whatsoever. And while I was sitting in that closet, I saw a fork, like a fork in the road. In my mind, I saw a fork. And it was check out, like completely check out from life, as in not be here anymore, or get help. Because I was that far gone. And I sat in there for a very long time and cried and was very angry. And when I finally came out of there, I phoned my mom and I said, I need you to come and help me. And she did right away that night. And I went to my therapist and I took 3 months off of work and I took care of myself. And in that therapy session, one of them, my therapist said, you know, you're supposed to do something with this pain, right? You're supposed to do something with your journey. And I didn't know what she meant by that, but it stuck in my brain. And then it came to me over time. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to talk about this. I'm supposed to talk about this. All right. And so that's how my podcast came to be. Hard, Beautiful Journey is sharing our story. That's how it started, was sharing our journey through infertility and our parenting struggles with kids with ADHD and ODD and everything that goes into that. And I honestly thought, and before I did it, I sat down with James, my ex, and I had written everything out and I read it to him. And I said, are you okay if I do this, if we share this? And he was completely on board, completely. And I had the thought, if I share all of this and that's all that happens is I share that and nobody listens or nobody cares, cool, it's out there. And that isn't what happened. Everybody was like, oh my Lord, thank you for sharing that. And I'm now at 90 episodes and still going. And I'm talking with other people who are sharing their hard, beautiful journey and who are sharing their stories and being vulnerable and helping one other person in the world by doing so. So that's how that all came to be.
And now you're on my podcast.
And now I'm here. So I'm on a break from my podcast right now for the summer. And the reason why is because I wanted to share my story on other people's podcasts and be a guest for once. So I am enjoying being on this side of the microphone and being asked the questions in a different way to also make me think about different parts of my story, because it's an ongoing healing journey every day. And so, like, you bringing up these questions to me is helping me heal more. And even though I'm crying, I see those tears as healing tears, not anything to be ashamed of.
How long ago was that time in the closet?
2018. It was, no, sorry, 2017. 2017, and it was 2018 that I found out about my brother and his stuff. So 2017, I was going through a lot of therapy, really working on my own healing journey. And that's when, and then into early 2018 is when I went to that mom's retreat in North Carolina. And I had just found out about my brother's stuff as well. So it was a lot. I was processing a lot of that stuff with my brother and my dad through therapy as well, because it did bring up what happened between me and my brother, that helped me understand our journey. So yeah, that 2-year period was pretty difficult. But it's just gotten, it's an interesting thing because it's gotten easier, but also hard because of the grief of losing him and then my marriage ending. But it's because of the work that I'm doing on myself that I know that's why I'm getting through these things. Otherwise, I would not be here, like at all, because it was so difficult before I started getting therapy and talking with people and just being vulnerable and hearing other people's stories and sharing experiences and knowing I'm not alone. And all of those things have helped me get through these grief journeys. Because if I would have kept it to myself and just sat here and did nothing, it would have been not a good situation.
Where are things at now with your ex-husband and with the kids and the dynamics of all of that? Like how have you navigated all of that?
Oh, that is a very good question. Well, trying to decide how much to share. So there was a lot of rejection that I faced in our marriage from my ex-husband. A lot of rejection, intimately and connection-wise. And there was a point when my daughter was 1 year old that I almost left him because it had been 11 years of it. And I know some of it stems from the infertility and like the failure side of it, but it just wasn't getting any better. And finally, when my brother passed away, things hadn't been really good for about a year before he passed away. But when my brother passed away, James gave me a couple of big hugs to comfort me. And I realized I hadn't been in his arms like that for many years.
Mm.
And I was like, well, why did it take losing my brother for this to happen? Like, so that after he died, I was just like, what? Why? You know? And that's when my brother dying was a wake-up call for me. It's like, life is too short. Life is too short. And I don't think our kids ever saw us hug, kiss, hold hands, maybe once. And that's it. We were roommates, taking care of our kids, quite literally. And I tried numerous times over the 20 years that we were together to get us to a place where we could be intimate and connected and all of it. I don't know how many times, countless times. And things would get good for a couple weeks. And it'd be kind of like, okay, let's just shut her up. Let's satisfy her, you know? And then it stopped. And it was just this cycle. And it just kept happening over and over and over again. And then my brother died, and I was like, no, I need more from this. And so I asked for a trial separation. And him and I went to marriage counseling, and we went separately, we went together. And our therapist said, in this 3-month trial, let's try it for 3 months, I need you to focus on yourself, only yourself, and nobody else. No, there's no third parties, nothing. And he chose not to do that. So that was really hard. Again, with the rejection. And so, but I also made it, I wanted my kids to not deal with any of that. I wanted them to have parents that weren't fighting, that weren't, mad at each other. And so I that's where I did shove stuff. And I said, okay, I'm gonna be friends with him at least. And that was working for a bit, but then I realized that it was actually harming my healing process. And just recently, over the last couple months, I've put in some pretty firm boundaries that no, you have your new life and I have mine. And the only thing that we need to talk about is our kids. And that's it. And maybe one day we'll get back to that place where we're friends, but not right now. And that's very, very hard for me. Because it's really hard for people to understand this, but the one thing that we did have in our marriage was a friendship. We had a really good friendship, and now I don't have that. And that's what I miss the most. So, a lot of grief. A lot of grief over the last 3 years. A lot of tears, a lot of guttural crying, like where I'm like, the type of crying where it's like an animal is coming out of you. But a lot of really good days too. A lot of really good days. And so when I'm having the low moments, I know, I call it my roller coaster. I have the craziest roller coaster. I swear to God, it's got so many twists and turns and ups and downs. And I'm also going through perimenopause, so there's that too. But I know that when I'm hitting that low on my roller coaster, I know I'm coming out of it a lot sooner, a lot quicker than I used to. And I can feel that. I'm not staying in those low moments as long as I was before. And it's because I'm talking. And if I need to, and I'm writing a lot and I'm breathing, I've started doing breath work and I meditate as well, but the breath work has really, really helped me. I am walking like I have never walked in my life. Like it is crazy how much walking I am doing. And it is helping my moods, my mindset. I cry when I walk, I smile when I walk, you name it. I do it all. I listen to music, and yeah, it's been a crazy 3 years.
How are the kids doing?
They I like I said, I talk to them all the time. All the time. And at first it was very difficult for them. But I am proud of James and I for that period of time in the initial separation and all of that, where we did have the united front, where we were both there for them and being friends, because it was an easier transition for them, an easier change for them in some regards. In some instances, I think it also confused them.
Mm.
And when I knew and felt that they were confused, I talked to them because I could see and feel the confusion. And I am not even exaggerating. I talk to them all the time. If I feel like they're having a hard day with something, or when they're moving between his house and my house, like I give them, on the day that it happens and they're coming back to me, I give them so much grace. If there's something that they're, in a bad mood, or because what happened actually when we separated is we were so amicable that we bought a condo together for him and I to move in and out of every week, and our kids would stay home in the family home until we sold it, or until we made the decision that it was going to happen. We were going to get a divorce. And so him and I were moving back and forth for 6 months. And so we got that experience of moving. And I'm so grateful for that, because it gave me so much compassion and empathy for that aspect of my kid's life now, that you don't really get settled. And it's not easy for them to do that, right? And so when they come back to me, or they go back to him, when they come back to me anyway, I give them that time to adjust. And then I check in with them, and just very open communication with them.
Since that experience of you moving back and forth informed you of how hard that can be, what kind of decision did you come to together then, as far as joint custody and visitation and all that?
We have 50-50, so we switch every week. We have them for 1 week at a time, and we're very, very, very good co-parents. That is, even with the boundaries that I've put in place, and the distancing myself from him in the friendship way, we are really good co-parents.
That's great to hear.
Really good. And I hope to God that never changes, ever, because I know and seen when it isn't that way. And I also know why it can't be that way if some of the people in the relationship are not cooperative, or just narcissists, or whatever, right? There's a variety of reasons why it can't be that way. if anything, out of our infertility journey and our parenting struggles and in those moments where I was like mad at God for this, I'm grateful that we have this parenting, co-parenting relationship. I'm grateful for that because those times where there's maybe only been 3 times in the last couple of years where I was just so angry at him for something that he did or said. And then I didn't talk to him for a week. Try parenting and organizing 3 kids' schedules with sports and schools and all of it. And you're not talking with them. It's impossible. And so, yeah, I made the decision and I told him everything is for the kids and I will strive to be the best co-parent with you because they deserve it and we deserve it after how hard we worked to get them here.
You mentioned how you were angry with God a couple of times. Where do you sit with that now?
I'm at a place of peace with it and understanding. And it was literally from what my therapist said when she said, you know, you're supposed to do something with this. There's a purpose behind it. And when I finally understood that I was supposed to help other people with this stuff and that everything is a lesson and that we're meant to help each other. I'm not supposed to keep all of this to myself and just suffer in silence. I was meant to help somebody else with my story. And when I finally understood that, I was like, okay, I got it. Got it, God. All right, but I could use about 5 minutes off now. Give me a break and then I'll talk to anybody. Just give me a break from the grief for a while. And I think he has for a while. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I think we're on the same mission. And my story kind of came to be too, because, it's one thing too to hold it in. And then once you start using your voice, like you said, it's healing to hear other people's stories and to share parts of your own with others. And that's why my podcast is called Grieving Voices. People can come on and use their voice, because I've personally learned that is a way to heal and process.
And
Like
process.
as we're talking about it, we're processing it. There's always something else to discover, and we don't connect those dots and we don't recognize those things when our lips are sealed.
No, absolutely.
Then it's our mind and our ego that's just running the show. We're not connecting with our hearts. So
yeah, as soon as you connect with your heart, it all changes.
And it's game on. It's really hard.
It's game on and it's like, okay, here we go. But it's worth it, in my opinion.
So what has your grief taught you?
It has taught me that I don't want to use the word strong. I am strong, but I am love. That's what it's taught me, is that I know how to love.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard.
Tell me the significance of 444.
My brother From the moment he died, has been showing me 444 in the most crazy of places. I believe in angel numbers and angel signs, and yeah, from the moment he died, I have been seeing 444. And not long after he died, after his funeral, I went to Texas for a work conference, and I was driving on the interstate by Corpus Christi in this billboard, one of those electronic ones, and all of a sudden 444 came up on the billboard. That's it. I'm like, and then on the radio, his songs came on, like right away. Like, and that's when I was like, so at first I didn't understand the 444, like when he first passed, but then when that happened, I was like, oh, that's your sign for me. Okay. All right, fine. And now it's like everywhere. Like I actually have screenshots on my phone when I wake up and I check my phone and it's 444. License plates on the, yeah, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.
There's a website I believe in that stuff too. And there's a website that I looked it up, and you probably have too, I'm sure.
Yes.
But what I looked up and what it says is that angel number 444 brings a message that all is well. Trust that you are on your correct life path and are doing a great job.
He's with me, guiding me through this whole thing. He was when I was writing the book too. I felt him with me everywhere when I wrote. Like I would actually take I write, if I tried to write in my house, or no way. Like things would distract me. I'd have laundry to do, you name it, right? No. A good show was on. So I would grab this chair of mine, like a beach chair kind of thing, and I would take it out to the mountains, and I would sit in the mountains by a river or by a lake, and I would write. And he was always with me, always. Like I could feel him with me. And I would write I went out to the ocean. I went out to Victoria and Vancouver, and I wrote by the ocean. And how I would describe my writing at some points was the waves, when they were coming in, were bringing stories to me. They were bringing memories, and they were bringing like all of our childhood stuff. And like it was like I was typing and they were like bringing them in. And then when they were going out, it was taking all the sadness and all of the pain. And it was just kind of like this in and out. And I have goosebumps right now because that's how it was working for me. So if I ever couldn't, if I was having a writer's block or couldn't get through a part of the book, I would grab my laptop and my chair and I would head out to the mountains, and yeah, it just came. And water and nature was so healing for me in my writing journey. And when I write my next book, because I know I'm meant to write another one, I will definitely do the same thing because that's what worked for me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. What is the best piece of advice you had received other than you have to do something with this pain?
Mm-hmm.
What was the best piece of advice you received while you were going through all this? And you lost a friendship too, but is that aside from your ex?
Yes. And that one I'm not quite ready to talk about yet. That one will be definitely in the second book. But the best piece of advice I think I got was, honestly, it was give yourself grace. And first I didn't know what that meant. And I was just like, what does that mean? Give myself grace. And now I find myself saying it to other people. And I actually just made a post about it the other day, is give yourself grace, and then give yourself more grace, and then give yourself more grace. Because life can be really, really hard. Really, really hard. And I got up. I got out of bed, and I had a shower, and I brushed my teeth. And some days I don't feel like doing any of that because I would be in a ball crying, right? Um, give yourself grace that you're doing the best that you can. Some days are harder than others, and not to beat yourself up if you're having a low day. If you don't feel like walking or exercising or eating well or any of the things where you feel you're failing, just give yourself grace and get up and try again.
I had a question and it escaped me. But I feel like you shared a lot that I think will resonate with my listeners. But is there anything that you feel you didn't get to talk about or something you didn't get to say that you would like to share here at the end?
Um, I think the thing that I would always want to say is that um, no matter what you go through, and things that could hurt you, or as long as there's love in your heart, for yourself, first and foremost, that is what will get you through these hard times. You can love other people, and I do. I love everybody, including my dad, including my ex. I have love for them. I love them. But if I don't love myself, it is a much harder journey. And I am absolutely falling in love with myself.
I would say that's also another thing that grief has taught you
Yes,
how to do.
yes. It has taught me how to fall in love with myself. And I'm very grateful for that.
And what gives you hope for the future?
Um, I have a lot of hope for the future. Um, like I said, there's days where I was in the fetal position and just guttural crying, right? And then there's days where I'm like really, really, really excited for what's to come. Like I have so much that I want to do, and so many people that I want to talk to, and so many places that I want to see. That's what gives me hope, is that I have that excitement. I have that desire to want to do those things. And if I didn't have that excitement and that desire, I think I would be a lot more like, I don't know, sad and depressed and all of those kind of things. But I have a lot of excitement for my future, for me, for my kids, for all of it.
It's wonderful. I love that. I love that for you. I love that for your kids.
Yes,
Because if you don't have hope, where's theirs?
exactly. And I know uh, I used to put them before anything, and especially with the challenges that we faced with them, with schools and doctors and everything. And I literally put them first. And I stopped doing that. And I put myself first. And I'm taking care of myself first and my well being and my mental health. And it is helping them because I am getting better. I am happier. I am more energetic now. I am like all of the things. And by taking care of myself first, it's benefiting them.
Would you say that that is your advice to parents who are raising children with ADHD and ODD? And
Absolutely. Because the way that I was doing it before, it put me behind the clothes in my closet
it's breaking
and
you.
looking for a way out. And I was completely broken. And it's when I decided to get help for myself and take care of myself first, that's when it all started to change. So, highly recommend. I understand it's hard to think that you have time to take care of yourself first when you're dealing with those kind of things. I've been there. I have 3 of them who all of them were challenging, are still challenging some days, and I didn't think I would survive. I quite literally didn't think I would survive parenting them, and it's when I made that choice to take care of me is when it all started to get better. Slowly, very slowly, but I could see the light. And it gave me hope, and I just kept going and going and going.
Comes back to cause and effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely does.
Where can people find you if they would like to connect with you and find your book and all the things?
I am on social media, so Instagram and Facebook at I am Tiff Carson. And my website is tiffcarson.com. And my book, Dancing in the Rain, is on Amazon. And my podcast is Hard Beautiful Journey. And you can find that anywhere, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. It's on all of them.
Thank you so much for sharing um, so openly and vulnerably as you did. And I have no doubts that anyone listening to this, there's a part of your story that will resonate with them.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to process some of my healing, some of my grief again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.